There is a woman who has spent years becoming more expensive. Her handbag is worth someone's salary. Her apartment sits in the most expensive part of the city. Her skincare routine costs more than some people's rent. She travels often, dresses better, eats better. And somewhere along the way, she began to believe that because her life became more expensive, she became more valuable. But there is a difference between increasing your value and increasing your price tag. And that difference can quietly reshape the way you love. Because you can spend $50,000 becoming the woman you believe a high-quality partner should want, and still bring the same anxiety into the relationship, the same fear of abandonment, the same difficulty trusting, the same tendency to choose emotionally unavailable men. You can upgrade everything around you without upgrading the part of you that determines whether intimacy feels safe. And that is the uncomfortable truth behind what I call the expensive woman delusion. This is not an argument against beautiful things. It is not an argument against ambition, financial independence, or wanting a financially compatible partner. It is about something more subtle. The moment when luxury stops being something you enjoy and starts becoming evidence you need to prove that you are worthy, then you're no longer simply buying the handbag. You are buying reassurance. You are no longer simply booking the beautiful hotel. You're trying to convince yourself that you have finally made it. And once your lifestyle becomes part of your identity, it can begin influencing something far more important than what you can buy. It can influence who you choose. Picture a woman sitting across from a man in an expensive restaurant. She's carrying a $5,000 handbag. Everything about her appearance communicates refinement. But she cannot relax. She's watching him. Can he afford my lifestyle? Does he belong here? And underneath those questions is another one. Am I valuable enough to be chosen by the kind of man I want? The handbag has become more than a handbag. It has become an armor. The more she needs it to communicate her worth, the less available she becomes for actual intimacy. Imagine a heavy glass ornament beneath the light of an expensive boutique. It is flawless, cold, perfectly polished. Everyone can see its surface, but inside, it is hollow. That is the polished shell. It is what happens when a woman becomes highly skilled at curating the external evidence of a life she has not yet learned to feel internally. The career is impressive. The clothes are impeccable. The photographs are beautiful. But underneath all of it is a nervous system that still does not feel safe. Instead of feeling valuable because of who she is, she begins to feel valuable because of what surrounds her. The address, the car, the designer label, the lifestyle, the partner she can attract. The problem is that your spending can increase much faster than your emotional development. You can upgrade your wardrobe in a weekend, move into a beautiful home in 6 months, but emotional regulation does not work that way. Neither does attachment security. Neither does judgment. Those things require time, self-awareness, discomfort, practice. And this is where we need to distinguish between financial capital and relationship capital. Financial capital is what you earn. Lifestyle capital is what you can access. Relationship capital is what you bring into the emotional architecture of a relationship. It is your ability to regulate yourself under pressure, to communicate clearly, to resolve conflict, to choose character over performance. These qualities do not come with a designer receipt. You can become more expensive without becoming more emotionally mature. There is a huge difference between increasing your value and increasing your price tag. A price tag tells you what something costs. It does not tell you what something is worth. And relationships work in much the same way. You can increase your financial standards without increasing your relationship capital. Relationship capital is built from qualities that are much harder to photograph: emotional stability, good judgment, warmth, reliability, the ability to resolve conflicts. You can become more expensive without becoming more emotionally mature. Imagine standing inside an enormous room. There are hundreds of doors, hundreds of possibilities. Then one by one, you begin closing them. Not because the people behind them are unhealthy, not because they are unkind, but because their lifestyle does not perfectly match the one you have curated. This person does not live in the right neighborhood. That person does not travel enough. This one is emotionally mature, kind, stable, and loyal, but simply does not look impressive enough on paper. So another door closes, and another. Eventually, the enormous room has become very small. Now you're asking, where are all the good men? But sometimes the issue is not that there are no good men. Sometimes your criteria have become so externally specific that you have eliminated people who possess the qualities that actually create a good relationship. This is not an argument for settling. It is an argument for knowing what you are actually screening for. There is a difference between requiring a financially responsible partner who can build a stable life with you and believing anyone who cannot immediately fund your lifestyle is beneath your consideration. One is compatibility, the other can become validation. Because wealth is not character, access is not emotional intelligence, status is not security, and an impressive lifestyle tells you very little about what it actually feels like to be loved by someone. Eventually, the performance ends. The restaurant disappears. The designer labels become irrelevant. And two people are left sitting across from each other. That is where the real relationship begins. The question is no longer, what kind of life can this person provide? It becomes, what kind of emotional environment does this person create? Because you can live in a beautiful house and still feel lonely. You can have financial security and still have zero emotional safety. Relationship capital isn't built on a luxury checklist. It is the quiet ability to experience peace together without manufacturing drama simply because peace feels unfamiliar. And if you have spent years becoming more expensive but never learned to recognize peace, you may choose the person who gives you the most impressive life instead of the person with whom you can finally exhale. At some point, every woman should perform an audit, not of her wardrobe, not of her bank account, not of the men she is dating, an audit of herself. Ask yourself, has my emotional intelligence grown at the same rate as my income? Has my ability to resolve conflicts improved? Have I become better at choosing partners? Do I recognize emotional availability? Can I tolerate peace? Can I receive love without constantly testing it? Do I know how to leave when something is unhealthy? Do I know how to stay when something is healthy? Have I become more discerning, or am I simply more difficult to impress? Because these are the upgrades that change your life, not just the ones that look good in photographs. You may discover that you have spent 5 years upgrading your external world while repeating the same relationship patterns, the same unavailable people, the same anxiety, the same endings. If that is true, you do not need another upgrade. You need a different kind of investment. You need to become more emotionally anchored, more discerning, more regulated, more capable of intimacy. Because lifestyle inflation is not the same thing as personal growth. And becoming more expensive is not the same thing as becoming more valuable. What does it actually mean to have high standards? Perhaps it means something much quieter than we were taught. Your standard is peace, not perfection. Peace. Your standard is emotional safety, not hedonic luxury. Your standard is respect, not public status. Because the highest form of discernment is not about knowing which restaurant costs $500 per person. It is about knowing which person will still treat you well when the restaurant is gone. The goal is not to become the most expensive woman in the room. It is to become the woman who no longer needs the room to tell her what she is worth. Maybe that is where the real upgrade begins. Not in the mirror, not in the wardrobe, not in the address, but somewhere quieter, somewhere no one else can see. You stop asking, how much more can I afford? And you begin asking, how much more can I become? You begin to understand that peace is a standard, that dignity is a standard, that emotional safety is a standard. You stop confusing chaos with chemistry. You stop confusing luxury with security. And slowly, the room gets bigger again. The doors begin to open. You begin to see people clearly, not for what they drive, not for what they wear, not for what they can purchase, but for who they are when no one is watching. And perhaps for the first time, you realize that the most valuable thing you can bring into a relationship is not the life you purchased, but it is the woman you became while building it. A woman who can be alone without feeling abandoned. A woman who can love without losing herself. A woman who can recognize peace and not mistake it for boredom. A woman who no longer needs to be expensive to know that she is worthy. Because the highest standard was never a price tag. It was a baseline of peace, a baseline of dignity, a baseline of self-respect. And when you finally build that baseline within yourself, you stop looking for someone to complete the picture. You start choosing someone who can stand beside it. And that is when everything changes. Not because your life became more expensive, but because you finally became conscious of its value. Know yourself. Choose better.